Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm Margaret, and here I share real-life stories from my friends at the nursing home. I remember the tremble in his voice when he told me, "It's bad, Elaine. It's terminal." He rubbed his forehead like it hurt to even say it out loud. "She didn't want to tell you. She doesn't want pity." I nodded, numb. I'd always thought his mother, Carol, was the strong, quiet type. The kind who wore expensive perfume but acted like she bought it at a pharmacy. She didn't like me. Not openly, but with that specific kind of disapproval that needs no words. Still, when I heard she was dying, something cracked open in me. A flood of memories from my own mother's final months, the way she shrank into hospital sheets while I held her hand and pretended not to cry. "Whatever she needs," I said. "Just tell me what we can do." That was 2 years ago. I'm 52. I wear my hair in a bun most days, not because I like it that way, but because I'm too tired to do anything else. I work part-time at a library branch that's slowly dying from lack of funding and too many damp teenagers who only come for the Wi-Fi. I used to teach English at the local high school, but when the budget cuts came, my name was among the first to go. "You're too quiet to fight for," the union rep said. I smiled and packed up my poetry books. That quietness, my stillness, it's always been mistaken for weakness. Frank, my husband, liked that about me in the beginning. "You don't need drama," he said on our second date. "You're like a lighthouse. You just stay solid while everyone else crashes around." At the time, it felt like a compliment. I didn't notice how easily he redirected the spotlight to himself, how often my accomplishments became his talking points. "Elaine's got this thing at work," he'd say, then explain it better than I ever could. By the time I turned 40, I realized I hadn't made a decision about my life in years without checking if it suited him. We never had kids. I wanted them. He said we couldn't afford them. We couldn't afford a lot of things, apparently. Vacations, new clothes, even fixing the broken washer that groaned like a dying beast every time I did laundry. But we could afford his mother's cancer treatments, chemo, radiation, experimental infusions in Miami, private nursing, flights, housing, organic juices. The list was endless. He handled it all, of course. "You don't need that stress," he'd say. "Just trust me." And I did. I sold the pearls. I dipped into my retirement. I borrowed money from my younger sister, Ruth, whose face twisted with confusion when I asked. "I thought you said Frank's mom had good insurance." "She does," I said, parroting Frank, "but it doesn't cover everything." I didn't see the bank statements. He said it was easier if he handled the transfers. We stopped going out to dinner. I started reusing tea bags. My coat had a tear under the arm that I stitched with dental floss. I became an expert in scarcity, a strange kind of pride in being the woman who needed nothing, the martyr wife, the caregiver to a woman who barely spoke to her. I imagined Carol in bed, thin and pale, tubes in her arms. I sent her care packages, soft socks, handwritten cards, even old photos of her and Frank from our wedding day. She never replied. Frank said she was too tired to write. Then last May, Ruth sent me a text. "Why is your M-oil on a cruise?" I stared at the screen for a long time, confused. I thought maybe Ruth was mistaken, a look-alike, a scam. But the photo was unmistakable. Carol, in a wide-brimmed hat, holding a cocktail with a little umbrella, her skin glowing, laughing. Behind her, a sparkling blue ocean and the word MSC Cruises barely visible on the lounge chair. I scrolled. There were more. Carol in a white robe, mid-massage. Carol in a pool with two other women, holding up glasses like a toast. Carol at a steakhouse, her plate piled high. My throat closed. When Frank came home that night, I showed him the photos. He didn't blink. "She's dying," he said, like I'd asked him something idiotic. "She wanted to live a little before the end. What's wrong with that?" "But this isn't—" I was sputtering. "She doesn't look sick." He dropped his keys hard on the counter. "You think cancer means lying in bed and waiting to rot? You just don't understand what real family is, Elaine." That sentence. It didn't land right away, but it lingered, like the aftertaste of something rotten. Real family. He said it with venom, like I'd failed some sacred test, and I realized he wasn't ashamed. He was angry that I dared question him. That was the night I stopped sleeping. I'd lie in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling while he snored. My chest tight, my thoughts loud. Things didn't line up. Not just the money, but the years. The guilt he'd wrapped me in. The constant reminders that we were barely scraping by, while Carol was ordering lobster on a boat in the Mediterranean. What if she'd never been sick at all? The thought seemed absurd, but once it crept in, it wouldn't leave. I couldn't ignore the weight in my gut, the invisible hands around my ribs. I started checking our bank records, the ones I did have access to. They told a scattered story. Withdrawals, cash transfers, wire payments to a secondary account under Frank's name that I didn't recognize. I looked up one of the cruise lines. Then I searched the luxury nursing facility Carol was supposedly in. Nothing matched. One night, I called the facility myself. The woman on the phone was polite. "I'm sorry. We don't have a Carol Middleton here. Are you sure you have the right place?" I hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't confront Frank again. Not yet. Something in me had shifted. A cold clarity. I wasn't just married to a liar. I was funding him. Frank started working late again. He claimed the new software rollout at the bank required overtime, and that his manager leaned on him for everything. I stopped asking questions. I nodded when I had to. I made dinner. I didn't tell him I'd already called the bank pretending to be a confused customer, asking about that mysterious second account. The representative said they couldn't discuss it due to privacy laws, even though it was in our name. But I caught the hesitation in her voice when I asked if it was my account. "It's jointly owned," I said. A pause. "I'm afraid I can't confirm that." That was confirmation enough. He'd opened it without me. For years, I'd thought we were barely surviving. Meanwhile, he was sending monthly transfers into this hidden fund. For her. Or for himself. Probably both. Once you spot a lie, you start seeing them everywhere, like fingerprints on a glass. I remembered the emergency flight he took to see her in Sarasota. He was gone for 5 days and came back with a sunburn. "Stress rash," he said. I remembered how, just 6 months earlier, he told me we couldn't afford to get the brakes fixed on my car. "Just drive less," he said. "Walk when you can." I remembered the time I found an earring under the passenger seat. A gold hoop, not mine. He said it belonged to a co-worker who hitched a ride. "Don't be jealous," he said, laughing. "You're the only woman who still gives a damn about me." The pain wasn't sharp. It was slow, like standing in the ocean as the tide pulls sand from under your feet. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. I was just hollow. Ruth noticed first. We were sitting in her kitchen, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt toast. She reached across the table, touched my wrist. "You're disappearing again," she said. "I'm fine." "No, you're surviving. There's a difference." Ruth and I used to be close, but Frank never liked her, said she filled my head with resentful spinster energy. Over time, I'd stopped calling, guilt wrapped in obedience. He had a talent for making me doubt my own instincts. Now, in the warm light of her kitchen, I felt like I'd woken from a spell. I told her everything about the photos, the accounts, the lie. My voice cracked once, then steadied. She didn't gasp. She didn't rage. She just said, "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know." "You could leave." I smiled without humor. "And go where? With what?" "He drained everything, Ruth. There's nothing left." She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. "Then we rebuild. Quietly. Together." That night, I wrote down everything I could remember. Every withdrawal, date, amount. I printed what bank statements I could find. I created a folder and labeled it Truth. I started recording conversations. Subtle ones. I'd ask, "Did you send the payment to the clinic this month?" He'd mutter, "Yeah, I sent it like always. Same transfer." I kept those voice notes. I researched financial abuse. The term struck me like lightning. Abuse that doesn't leave bruises, just debt, fear, and obedience. He never hit me. He just made sure I never had enough to leave. The plan came slowly. Not revenge. Not exactly. Just exposure. Unveiling. I needed proof. But more than that, I needed power. Some leverage. It came, oddly enough, from Carol herself. One of her friends messaged me on Facebook, a woman named Denise. We'd met once at a Christmas party 10 years ago. She sent a cheerful message. "So lovely to see Carol enjoying her retirement. She says she's heading to Santorini next month. She's lucky to have a son like Frank footing the bill. Hope you both are planning to join soon." Retirement. Santorini. My hands trembled. I messaged back. Casual. Friendly. "Yes. It's been such a journey. So glad she's well enough to travel." Then I asked, "What a miracle she beat the cancer, right?" Denise replied, with a confused emoji. "Cancer? No, she's been healthy for years." I screenshot everything. It was done. I had what I needed. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed the satisfaction to be earned, not screamed across the kitchen. I wanted to walk away clean. I opened a separate checking account. I had my next paycheck deposited there. I told Frank it was a library policy update. He barely listened. Ruth helped me find a lawyer. She paid for the retainer without blinking. "Consider it back rent for stealing my Barbies in '83, she joked. We met with a financial abuse advocate. She looked at me like I wasn't crazy. "You're not alone," she said. "And you're not weak. You're just tired of surviving someone else's story." For the first time in a decade, I exhaled without fear. Frank still left every morning, still kissed me on the cheek, still called me his lighthouse. He had no idea I was already drifting away. Then, one morning, I left a manila envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, all the bank statements, all the screenshots, the messages from Denise, a printout of Florida property records showing he'd bought Carol a condo in cash. On the front of the envelope, I wrote, "You told me I didn't understand real family. Turns out I do. And I'm not yours anymore." I locked the front door behind me. The first night in Ruth's guest room was the quietest night I'd had in years. There was no snoring, no television humming at 2 a.m., no Frank pacing the kitchen, muttering about how tight things are this month. Just the gentle whir of the ceiling fan and the occasional sound of a car passing on the wet street. Freedom doesn't arrive like fireworks. It arrives like stillness. I waited for a reaction. A text, a call, some grand show of remorse. But Frank said nothing for 3 days. Then came an email. You don't understand what you've done. I was protecting you. You're being emotional. This isn't the full picture. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to the lawyer. She filed the paperwork the next morning. Divorce proceedings take time. He tried to stall, tried to shame me into mediation. He claimed the accounts were a surprise fund for our future, that Carol had earned his support because she was his only real family. He blamed my hormonal paranoia. He even tried to twist it into me being unwell. My lawyer wasn't impressed. He's textbook, she said. Control, guilt, gaslighting. He didn't expect you to wake up. Still, it wasn't easy. I had nothing but a bag of clothes, an old laptop, and $487 in my new account. I felt ashamed asking Ruth to cover groceries. She insisted. You're not a burden, she said. You're healing. I applied for full-time work at the library and got it. They moved me to a managerial track, and I started running programs for seniors and teens. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every paycheck felt like a breath. I started walking in the mornings. Just me, the sky, and a travel mug of too strong coffee. I passed a bakery on 3rd Street every day, always smelling like cinnamon and butter, always just out of reach. Then one day, I walked in. The woman behind the counter had silver hair and kind eyes. She asked if I wanted anything warmed. I said, whatever's fresh. She handed me a warm almond croissant on the house. You look like you needed it. I cried on the sidewalk, laughing through the tears. Little pieces of life began to return. I reconnected with a friend from my old teaching days. We had lunch. She told me about her divorce and how she hadn't realized how much she'd shrunk until she was alone in a room and could hear her own thoughts again. I started journaling, just a few lines a day, sometimes just one. I am not hard to love. I deserved better than silence. He lied, and I lived through it. The court case unfolded quietly. He didn't fight as hard once he realized I had the proof. I didn't ask for alimony. I just asked for my share, half of everything he tried to hide. The judge awarded it. The condo in Sarasota had to be sold. Carol sent me a message through her lawyer, calling me vindictive. I framed it and hung it in the guest bathroom at Ruth's house. The best revenge isn't loud. It's living. One afternoon, months later, I walked past that same bakery and saw a sign in the window. Help wanted, mornings only. I walked in and asked if they needed someone to start Monday. The silver-haired woman, her name was Marla, looked at me for a second. Can you be here at 6 a.m. and not hate it? I already wake up at 5. She laughed. You're hired? That job wasn't about money. It was about joy. The joy of hot bread in my hands, of strangers smiling when I handed them something sweet. The joy of reclaiming mornings. I told no one about it at first, not even Ruth. I wanted one thing in my life that was just mine. It was around that time that I saw Frank again, at the grocery store. He looked smaller, thinner, hair grayer. He spotted me near the self-checkout and paused. His hand hovered like he might wave. I stared back. Not coldly, just neutrally. A woman seeing a stranger she used to know. He walked away. Later that night, he emailed again. Just so you know, Carol's moving in with me. Her health isn't what it used to be. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I was already gone. The bakery became a second home. There's something healing about early mornings. The way the light crawls across the tiled floor, the sound of a mixer humming like a lullaby in reverse. Marla taught me how to braid challah with flour-covered hands and zero judgment. The first time I got it right, she patted my shoulder and said, You're steadier than you think. I started bringing home day-olds to Ruth's house. We'd sit on the couch after dinner, splitting a crusty baguette with butter and salt, watching crime shows and mocking the detectives. I hadn't laughed like that in years, the kind of laugh that doesn't apologize for its volume. I was still tired, still scarred. But I was free. On weekends, I'd go to estate sales with Marla. She had a sharp eye for vintage finds. Brass lamps, mid-century dresses, forgotten oil paintings. I never had a taste for clutter, but something about holding old things made me feel grounded. Proof that lives had been lived before mine. People who made mistakes too, but who left something beautiful behind. One Saturday, at a dusty estate sale in a peach-coloured bungalow, I found a typewriter. A real one. Black keys, faded ribbon, the kind I used in college when I thought I'd be a writer. I bought it for $8. That night, I typed the first page of something. I didn't know what yet, but the sound of the keys was better than therapy. My fingers remembered the rhythm. The words came slower than they used to, but they came. Frank filed for bankruptcy 3 months after the condo was sold. Ruth read it in the local notices. She handed me the newspaper without a word. I stared at his name in tiny print. A man who once controlled everything, now reduced to paperwork. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. He built a kingdom on guilt, and now it was dust. People began to notice the change in me, the women at the library, the teens in my creative writing group, even Ruth. "You stand straighter," she said one morning. "Like you're taller than your bones." "I feel taller," I said. "I feel like I'm mine again." I took the typewriter to the bakery once, just for fun. Marla rolled her eyes. "You gonna start writing novels in here?" "Maybe. You better write me in as the hot love interest." "Obviously." She winked. A part of me had been afraid of growing older, of being 52 and starting over with nothing. But in truth, I had less noise, less clutter, and far more clarity. I started saying no to things I didn't want. I stopped apologizing when I wasn't sorry. I bought myself flowers once a week, not for a special occasion, just because I used to wait for someone else to. One day, a woman came into the bakery wearing a camel coat and too much perfume. She had Carol's cheekbones and Frank's eyes. For a second, I thought it was Carol, but it wasn't. Just someone who reminded me. She asked for 2 croissants, no bag. As I handed them over, I thought about how easily I'd given my life to someone else. How long I'd stood in that quiet prison, convinced it was shelter. But I wasn't in that place anymore. I watched her walk out, heels clicking, head high, and I smiled. It wasn't revenge that satisfied me. It was dignity. And dignity, I've learned, is best served warm, with butter. A year after I walked away, I signed the last of the divorce paperwork and officially became Elaine Middleton no more. I sat in the parking lot of the courthouse with my coffee, watching strangers pass by with their arms full of manila folders and nerves. I wasn't nervous anymore, not sad, not angry, just whole. The final settlement came through in full. The court recognized the hidden accounts, the financial abuse, the manipulation. Frank's attorney tried to paint me as emotionally unstable, but the paper trail spoke louder than his spin. I received my half, and with it, I bought my freedom, not just from him, but from scarcity. I didn't buy a house. I rented a little cottage near the bakery. 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a lemon tree in the backyard that looked like it needed a second chance too. I painted the kitchen pale blue, bought a used dining table and mismatched chairs. Ruth came over with wine and an old set of our mother's plates. It's not big, I said. It's yours, she said. That makes it enormous. The day I moved in, I carried my typewriter in last, set it gently on the desk by the window, next to a pot of tulips. I started writing again. Short stories, essays, fragments of memory. I submitted a few to online journals. 2 were published. One editor wrote back, "Your voice is quiet, but it carries far." I printed that email and taped it above the desk. Some nights I still think about Frank. Not with longing, not even hatred, just curiosity. About how someone can live beside another person for decades and never really see them. About how love, twisted into control, can look like care. I imagine him in his condo, probably smaller now, probably watching the news with a glass of something strong. I wonder if Carol ever learned the cost of her comfort. I wonder if she even cared. But then I return to myself, to this life made of cinnamon mornings, handwritten pages, and laughter with Ruth on lazy Sundays. To the girl I used to be, before silence became my second language. To the woman I became when I broke the silence. One evening, just after dusk, Marla closed the bakery early. We sat on the back step, eating burnt scones and drinking wine from paper cups. She asked me what I would have done if I hadn't found out about the cruise, if I'd never seen the photo. I thought for a long moment, then said, I probably would have kept shrinking, until there was nothing left. She nodded. But you didn't. No, I said. I didn't. She looked at me like she was trying to see something beneath my skin. You know what I like about you, Elaine? I raised an eyebrow. You don't raise your voice. But when you leave, you take the ground with you. I smiled. Let the words land like sunlight on my shoulders. I was 53 now. Too old for drama. Too young to stop blooming. I had calluses on my hands, laugh lines around my eyes, and 1,000 quiet plans ahead. And I was just getting started. He said I didn't understand real family, but I do now. Family doesn't drain you dry and call it love. It doesn't demand your silence as proof of devotion. Family shows up with croissants, or lends you rent money without keeping score, or sits on the kitchen floor with you while you cry about nothing and everything. Family lets you be your full self, no shrinking required. So now I write, I bake, I walk under wide skies, I listen to music in the mornings and dance when no one's looking, and I live, fully, fiercely, quietly powerful. Because the best revenge isn't watching them fall, it's standing tall and never asking permission to rise again.